Welcome to Versefest 2020. Bienvenue à Versefest 2020. My name is Hubert Lucier and I have the honor to chair Verse Ottawa's board. Je suis le président du conseil d'administration de Verse Ottawa. This year marks our 10th festival. As with previous editions, our program comprises a wealth of poets in many genres from several continents. We present in English and in French. For reasons that will be obvious to everyone, this year also constitutes a first in that we're entirely online. That being said, we remain an Ottawa-based organization, and I want to acknowledge that Ottawa is part of the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The mindset in preparing this festival went far beyond let's grin and bear it. We've added several new formats to our sessions. We're making them accessible to all, free of charge. We're allowing for more dialogue between poets and the audience. Cette année introduit une grande nouveauté puisque nous vous accueillons exclusivement en ligne. Cela a signifié davantage que faire contre mauvaise fortune bon cœur, car nous avons enrichi notre offre de sessions originales qui permettront, je l'espère, de rejoindre et faire dialoguer avec les poètes participants un public plus large que jamais. Rien de cela n'aurait été possible sans le concours d'une équipe de bénévoles dévoués, ni sans les partenaires qui nous accordent leur soutien, parmi lesquels le Conseil des arts du Canada, la Ville d'Ottawa, le Conseil des arts de l'Ontario, Patrimoine canadien et l'ACFO d'Ottawa. Je les remercie chaleureusement, de même que vous, chers membres de notre public, tout en vous souhaitant un excellent festival. None of this would have been possible without a fantastic team of volunteers. Our various partner organizations devoted to the promotion of poetry in Canada's National Capital Region, as well as our sponsors, among which the Canada Council for the Arts, the City of Ottawa, the Ontario Arts Council, Canadian Heritage, and ACFO d'Ottawa. In closing, I want to thank you, members of our audience, and wish you a wonderful festival.
Bonsoir, chers amis du festival et chers auteurs et auteurs. Au nom de tous ceux et celles qui ont travaillé d'arrache-pied à la préparation et au montage de ce festival, je voudrais vous souhaiter la plus chaleureuse des bienvenues. Le festival a lieu habituellement en mars, mais Covid oblige. Et puis, voilà, comme plusieurs autres manifestations publiques, et notre festival vous arrive de façon virtuelle. Alors, bienvenue au Versefest d'Ottawa 2020. Le festival a lieu habituellement en mars, mais Covid oblige. Et voici que, comme tant d'autres manifestations publiques, notre festival vous arrive de façon virtuelle. Alors, quand même, bienvenue au Versefest d'Ottawa 2020. Cette version virtuelle et toute nouvelle, je dirais, de notre festival est une expérience dans laquelle, bien sûr, nous implorons votre compréhension et parfois même, peut-être, votre patience. Pour plusieurs de nos présentations, nous utiliserons Zoom et YouTube.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Versefest 2020. My name is Monty Reed, and I'm the director of the festival, and I'm here with my colleague, Michel Terrien, and together we'll be your hosts for this presentation. As you probably know, our festival usually runs in March, but COVID-19 put an abrupt halt to those plans, and we've had to reconfigure everything for an online festival. It's been a challenge, but I'm happy to say that Versefest 2020 is now on, with almost all the poets that were scheduled for March and a few exciting additions. And we're glad to welcome everyone to this poetry-rich online space. it remains one of the largest poetry events in the country. We're still experimenting a little bit with the format. Some of our events will be on YouTube, some of them will be on Zoom. In some cases, we'll switch from one to the other in the same presentation. We're trying very hard to make it glitch-free, but you know what happens. Sometimes the technology is uncooperative, and sometimes the users are that way too. There are many other contributors to thank, of course, and you can see the full list on our website. We're again supported by dozens of volunteers, and we want to thank all of them. I know we've tested the patience of our production folks, Brian Peary and Mike Kaie in particular, and they've always come through. And for the poets who we've booked and canceled and booked again and scheduled and rescheduled, thanks for sticking with us. And for our audience, let me just say we're glad you're here with us and with many of the finest poets anywhere. The format for many of these events is this. All of the invited poets will give brief readings. Then we'll open it up to a moderated discussion and comments from the audience. In some cases, where we have a bonus video or other extras, you may have to find the correct button on the website. We'll be available if you have questions. And now, to open the festival, I'd like to welcome Albert Dumont. Albert Dumont is a spiritual advisor to the Algonquin Kitigan-Zibi Anishinaabe. He's an activist, a volunteer, and a poet who has published 6 books of poetry and short stories. In recognition of his work, he received a Human Rights Award from the Public Service Alliance of Canada. And in January 2017, he received the Dreamkeepers Citation for outstanding leadership. Albert has dedicated his life to promoting Aboriginal spirituality and healing, and to protecting the rights of Aboriginal people, particularly those of the young. Albert Dumont.
Kaie, my name is Albert Dumont. All my relations know me as Ushkinodin, which means new wind in the Algonquin language. I'm very honored to help you out today with this opening. I'm going to just maybe share something in a moment, but before I do that, I'd like to read you something that I wrote back in, I think it was 1993. Time is the storage place of our memories, and the heart is the storage place of our tears. I have gone to that place of memories, and I have visited where tears are kept. And what I retrieved was the notion that poetry is delightful to the spirit. And to me, it truly is. Poetry actually has had a lot to do with my own personal healing. I have, I overcame severe alcohol addictions. I've been sober now for over 32 years. And writing poetry, reading poetry, and reflecting on the poetic words of my ancestors was a truly healing thing for me. It's really something, to be able to say that you have been able to overcome severe addiction through the power of words. But for me, that is the reality. Also, I want to say about the spirituality and why a lot of things of words and poetic words are connected to our spiritual beliefs. Because whenever we want to make a point, bring a point across, it's really stronger and more beneficial if we could do it in a poetic way. poetry packs a punch, a spiritual punch. Poetry can heal the emotional. You know, I suffer a chronic back pain. I had a bad accident just almost 30 years ago, and I live with chronic pain. But for me, it's physical pain is really a cakewalk when we compare it to emotional pain. Emotional pain is the worst pain a human being can feel. That's what I know about it. And poetry is a medicine for emotional pain. If somebody's in a bad way emotionally, you know, they could write a poem. If you're in a joyful mood, then you could write a poem. For whatever is in the front of you or inside of you, you can write poetry. So I'm a big believer in poetry, and I welcome you to the Algonquin territory. I know that this gathering is going to heal and to bring a lot of pride and good memories to anyone who participates in it. So I wish you all the best from Kitigan Zibi, where I live. So good luck to everybody, and keep writing. I know that for me, I'm in the winter of my life right now, and I hope I have a long winter ahead of me. But if I live to be 85, 90, or 100 years old, I will never, ever stop writing poetry. So miigwech and have a good time.
It's pretty heady times for our next poet. Kaie Kellough's Magnetic Equators won the Griffin Poetry Prize just a few months ago. And his brand new book of short fiction, Dominoes at the Crossroads, was nominated for the Giller Prize and is also up for the Montreal Book Award. He was born in Vancouver, lived in Calgary for many years, and moved to Montreal in 1998. He's a novelist, a poet, a flaneur, and a brilliant performer. And we're delighted to have him with us tonight. Kaie Kellough.
This is Kaie Kellough. I'm coming to you live from Montreal, and it's nice to be here with Ottawa Versefest and to have the chance to read some poetry as part of the festival. So thank you to the festival for having me. Thank you to Mike for recording me, and thank you to all of the other festival staff and volunteers for making the online move this year to deal with the realities of COVID. So I hope everyone is staying safe and is in the mood for some poetry. I'm going to read from my most recent book of poetry called Magnetic Equator, which came out in the early part of 2019, March 26, 2019. And these are some passages that move back and forth from North to South America, which is the essential movement that the book takes on, moving from Guyana, South America, up to Calgary, Alberta, and back down. Descended, in part, from a continent shaped like a question mark. Descended, in part, from those who were sold. Descended, in part, from those indentured. Descended, in part, from those who rebelled. Descended, in part, from Charles Tanner Lamb of Hong Kong, migrant to Guyana circa 1800 long. Descended, in part, from those who bought and owned others. Descended, in part, from a question mark. Perhaps Arawak, perhaps Indian, perhaps Portuguese, perhaps English. I don't know how not to be multiple. I don't know what to desire from this avowal. I listen for a word, a welcome, but the ocean kisses its foaming teeth and tosses its head. Its pressed curls twirl in style, show its snub, show its art. Did I expect to be addressed? No sudden solar flare ignites a blood understanding back into the septic Atlantic that flattens as it extends to the horizon. Nothing is my meditation. Nothing is a radio with antenna raised, its cheap speakers tinned ping, noise surging in a curled conch, or a voice hollowed in bone. Gulls, pinned to the edge of the wind, sing single notes. Big tankers float, their bulk resonant. Drums, their engines, shiver through the chopped water, up the shore, not in even measure, but staggering, ruckus, irate, dispatching aftershocks through the city's asphalt. The ships swell at anchor, hands cupped to receive a cargo of bauxite, lumber, labor, drugs bound for another accounting that sums elsewhere. Beyond this local preface to privation, paradise ripening in frustration, the swollen ships angle toward Port of Spain, Miami, New York, Kingston, Havana, Montreal, Vancouver. Here, on this continent, what of black versus brown, fratricidal quadrille rung on the steel oil drum? What of Prime Minister Burnham's eye, the bomb his men rigged to blow Rodney silent, blow a hole in the walkie-talkie, announcing its dry spark across Savannah, its crackle hurried on FM frequencies, the non-aligned nations fallen into static, into phalanx with the Cubans, the Vietnamese, clamoring that class is not ingrained in skin, in color, in black at the bottom, red in the middle, and gold close enough to join the local elite. Trujillo, Papa, Baby Doc, Pinochet, the red comrades, usurping menace adrift on the mute breeze, a hint of authoritarian dynamite ticking under the topos. The open ocean discloses nothing. Trafficking. Where is my dread welcome? Where my fatigues, my locks, my beard, my non-aligned rifle? Where is my revolution? The author's voice drones, harmonizes with the room's ambient hum, fuses with the electric zzz, amplified by a ventilation shaft. Its sawtooth wave climbs a doorframe, bores into a ceiling panel, vibrates down to linoleum, and rebounds up femurs, tibias, spinal columns, spirals into cranial orifices, and drones on. A boy who does not belong in this faculty, in this book, in this time or place, who should not be remembered, stands and asks the mannered, middle-aged authors about writing and place, and whether they write from place, about place, to place, whether their sentences subsist against snow and suffer migraines when the Chinook arches its cloud-rippled dome airtight, shut over the drive-ins of southwestern Alberta, whether their lives are bounded by a reserve or by the trembling, rickety wooden homes that stagger around Victoria Park, Skid Row in the Saddle Dome's shadow. Autumn, 15 years later, without answer, he is speeding, seated, shot on a chrome greyhound, through golden farmlands at sunset, pink and orange beams streaming between leaves, scattering shadows across the directionless flatness. An asphalt strip divides the foothills, drives forward and back, between pasts and futures, wow and flutters, through towns inhabited by baseball caps and plaid shirts, by Tim Hortons, by belt buckles, clinked locked above zippered Wranglers, by Ford pickups raising dust on old boy back roads, abandoned barns angled with the wind, cowboy hats adrift atop the ryegrasses, fence posts bound by barbed wire, wooden churches whose doors open onto fire and boredom. I was wondering whether your writing is haunted by place. Does place matter? Do your letters inhabit locales? The writers circumnavigate the question with smiles and gestures that dismiss. They write from everywhere at once, or from nowhere exactly, and the only place is the imagination, the immediate port at which the next letter enters, arrives, is detained, or vanishes. The imagination exists neither here nor there, is everywhere, which is here, which is nowhere. The letters rush into the Black Dipper, the great cipher of our gaping television sets. They come from nowhere. They ride the wheel of fortune. The price is irrelevant because an oil well bubbles in our backyards. Here is nothing but letters like constellations that predate suburbs and belong to no one. They simply exist and multiply in spite of no cluster of skyscrapers in the center of no city, no round tower revolving at the center of no still burbs, no bungalows stretching flatly, no foothills, no stupid mute sky yawning into no solar system, no specific context for our living, our violence, just the words suspended, turning in the sharp air. I think differently in Montreal from how I did in Calgary. I write and dream in Georgetown, Guyana, with a flying fish carried on the frothed surge of a thought, a heron hunting iguana amid low bush, a god folded into the body of a golden frog squatting in a puddle of dew at the heart of the giant bromeliad, two marble eyes beaming, creation into my electric cortex, my skull, a satellite dish in the backyard, curved and wondering, curved and receiving, a cup to catch abundance, a screen flickering at the drive-in, a pale yawn, waiting from a close encounter from... And thank you very much. That was a couple of poems from Magnetic Equator, and I urge you to enjoy the rest of the festival and the rest of the readings. Thank you very much.
Anne-Marie Desmeules est une vibrante poétesse de la relève et elle vit à Lévis, près de Québec. Son récent recueil, Le tendon et l'os, s'est mérité le prix du gouverneur général en 2019 et sa suite de poétique, intitulée Boulot, a été finaliste au prix de Radio-Canada. Chers amis, accueillons cette poétesse de l'intime et de la nature, Anne-Marie Desmeules.
Ce qui nous attend, une île ravagée par les singes, une fête blanchâtre au feu éteint. Le monde inondé. Nous entamons la traversée par dizaines sur des chevaux ivres et décapités. Dans ces jardins d'uranium et d'aromates, des boues si denses que le soleil suffoque. Nos têtes emballées de thé hochent au petit trot. La nuit de coton lèche nos sacrums. Nous faisons demi-tour à l'extrémité du continent, lisière de saguaros pourris, flots de méduses, flamants en croix à l'embouchure des rivières mortes. Nous parcourons des pays sans fenêtres, leurs maisons tracées à la craie. Les enfants allumettes dorment parmi les jacinthes. Les joncos n'ont plus chanté. Ils attendent le gargouillis des ruisseaux phosphorescents. Sur le corps de leurs frères calcinés, des hommes prêts à reprendre femme, jupe au poing s'arrogent une paternité sanglante. La lignée se remet en branle, en cadence avec les pics flamboyants. Passé la potence, l'arbre funèbre perce les trois mondes. Cécité, pelage, envol. La nuit nous encercle d'obus sifflants, de destroyers en rase-motte. Nos rêves s'achèvent au terme d'une très longue route, sur une porte condamnée. L'ordre dévaste le jardin des mers. les cadettes coupent leurs cheveux, les tueurs ont gagné les hauts plateaux. Il n'y aura bientôt plus personne pour laver les pieds de ceux qui tombent, qu'une foule sans yeux, un marécage goudronneux, biliaire. Carcasses de métal, racines arrachées, chair pourpre et noire, fragrance. Les sons voyagent sans obstacle entre les parois nues. Poussière de neige et d'agencement cosmique, le monde pulse du calme sauvage d'un abdomen défoncé. Enfants grises, poupées dépossédées de leur langue, mariées, comptées parmi les biens, enfants turquoises, pulpes muettes en surface de l'histoire, brisées, fanées, violettes écloses dans les chambres silencieuses, poèmes, enfants aimés trop tôt. Nous avançons parmi les pièges aux confins des banlieues mortes. Depuis les dernières neiges, nous avons perdu beaucoup d'amis. Dans le froid et la faim, nous avons grugé leurs ossements. Éventail de ciguës, foin balayé d'un vent soudain, nous nous exerçons à la reconnaissance des plantes, vomissons beaucoup, nous tenons. Entre les arcs-en-ciel d'huile et le brou écrasé, un sexe lent expulse un visage humain d'une densité supernova. Les volatiles substances sont capturées vives puis emballées dans les loques des cadavres, irréversiblement transposées dans ce macrocosme de basalte. Pour nos feux, restent les histoires. Ciel calme sans jour, pas d'oiseaux. Nous portons un soin froid à nous maintenir en vie. Nos réserves ont atteint la limite de ce que nous pouvons porter. Nous débordons en grappes légères, fragiles, incertains. L'anxiété a pris l'allure du pamplemousse, elle rayonne acide et rose autour d'un vide fibreux. Nous ne sommes pas si forts, disons-nous, que nous oublions de nous asseoir à ras le monde pour contempler l'iridescence des faisceaux. Nos bottes ont crevé la sphaigne. Nous nous sommes engouffrés dans un mètre d'eau glacée dans le paysage désolé de la tourbière. La Saracénie, bouche pointée vers les nuages, attendait sa pitance tandis que nous louttions pour émerger de la fosse. Depuis, le froid nous scie la moelle, nos pelisses tombent en croûte. Une mère aux pupilles opalines serre son bébé sous ses guenilles. 5 jours à sec, elle n'a plus de lait. Nous déposons au pied d'un pin le petit corps cyanosé, nos plaintes sans larmes évoquent les sirènes qui jadis dominaient nos villes. Ce que nous avons tué nous hante. Le passé s'enroule, corolle informe à nos coups. La faune, ses ravages déchirés, ses bouts teintés d'urine appellent la déception. Il nous faut sans relâche suivre, traverser, décoder. Certains mois de lune comestible, les bêtes n'apparaissent qu'aux âmes rongées. Elles offrent leur carne aux délaissés de la grande roue. Le plus souvent, le jour se résorbe sans nous laisser choisir le lièvre, ni la fable du lièvre. Les baies blêmissantes nous regardent, qui flottons sous nos vêtements nauséeux. La forêt se défile, mais encore, nous la déchiffrons. Nous avons investi une savane étroite, une clairière entre 2 collines. Nous avons construit nos abris à flancs de roc, disposés en terrasses entre les buissons d'aubépine, des amas de branches et de feuillages retenus par des racines, semblables à des furoncles sur un visage abîmé. Leur cheminée exhale en permanence une mince fumée qui s'affaisse et recouvre la vallée que traverse en son centre la rivière. Le quotidien se résume ici à ne pas mourir, ce à quoi nous échouons la plupart du temps. Nous rebâtissons le savoir, où champignons blancs et ratons laveurs sont devenus vecteurs d'agonie. Nous formulons de nouveaux commandements. Ton frère, ta sœur, tu ne mangeras point. Dans les rivières en crue, tu ne te baigneras point. De la nuit, tu te méfieras. De ton prochain, tu conserveras les biens précieux. Les saisons passent et les naissances continuent d'advenir, translucides dans leur masse de clarté. Les pères veillent et racontent l'amour. Les pères veillent, s'assèchent, puis meurent dans leurs gants. Ils n'auront oublié de la guerre aucune de leurs maîtresses, l'odeur du métal sur les doigts, le lilas de ses fesses grandioses, pure grâce, des charniers impossibles à décrire sur les nappes crème de la vie reprenant son cours. L'hiver chaque fois nous surprend. Chacun son alvéole et le poumon respire, se dilate et se fend. Le poumon se noie et se perd sous les côtes. Récurons nos bobos, maintenons au chaud les muqueuses. Lorsque chaque œuf aura chanté, que chaque plume se sera froissée, des grands voiles battront au vent. Dessous nos aisselles, des lambeaux vifs, des ibis étincelants, un voyage enfin. Nous n'habitons pas un canyon, mais la nuit des crotales, des hiboux sans ailes, la terre froide et la mésosphère, notre vallée tapissée de merles. Nous, visiteurs, nous colliers de crâne, promenons sans halte nos chevaux. Le sommeil s'étire dans ses mauves, menant sa caravane de bronze. Nous aimons les frontières là où elles se dissolvent, nous rentrons au camp. Carnet de l'incréé. Chacun de mes textes commencerait par « Je suis loin » et parlerait d'un projet désincarné qui n'aboutit pas. On y trouverait des spectres parce que c'est drôle, une tête de spectre, aussi parce que le plasma laisse passer la lumière et que j'aime la lumière. J'aime la lumière de 6h01, j'aime la lumière qui vient d'un seul côté du ciel, j'aime la lumière en mouvement, etc. J'ai du mal à planter le décor. Chaque jour, je regarde par la même fenêtre et cette fenêtre trop étroite ne me donne pas suffisamment de temps pour sortir. Ma fenêtre regarde dans de multiples directions, mais ma vision tunnel ne débouche sur aucun autre monde et sans cesse les questions se répètent à l'identique. Qu'est-ce qu'on mange? Quelle heure est-il? Qu'ai-je encore oublié? Les questions s'accumulent en strates. Elles bloquent le soleil, entravent le mouvement. Alors je remets à demain. J'atterre-moi. Je suis loin. L'éloignement est une manière de ne pas répondre. J'évite de m'imprégner de la matière qui compose la vie dans ce qu'elle a de plus prosaïque, le courrier, l'horaire, l'ameublement. Je refuse la banalité qui m'assiège. La guerre, le camp, les aventures deviennent des excuses pour être ailleurs. Des insultes jaillissent en lisses courtes, des noms de fleurs, des noms d'oiseaux. Les cumulonimbus accélèrent leurs chars allégoriques, agitent leurs mains en cristaux de laine rugueuse. Ma fatigue, mon immense fatigue, enfin dégorgée de sa pluie. Loin, comme dans loin des idéaux, loin des terres meubles et ensemencées, grands jets de sperme blanc sur humus noir. Amasser n'est pas écrire, gifler n'est pas écrire, pleurer sur le monde n'est pas écrire. Je m'astreins au fauteuil et deviens paradoxalement plus libre. Je m'assieds et je regarde. Végétaux agités, désordre de la maisonnée, chats joueurs. J'aspire l'air assoupli. J'ai acheté un cahier jaune et sans ligne. J'écris avec mes larmes.
Our final guest tonight is Karen Solie. She was born in Saskatchewan, lived for many years in Toronto, and is currently teaching in England. She's worked as a farmhand and a barista. And her books have won the Dorothy Livesay Prize, the Trillium Award, and the Griffin Poetry Prize, among many others. Her most recent collection, The Capely Caves, about a 7th century hermit, was shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot Award. She is, as one of her blurbs says, one of our most decorated poets, but her work is anything but decorous. It's quick, clear, always on the move somewhere, and always carrying the world's predicaments along with it. Well, we'll take them. Here's Karen Solie.
Hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to be included in the Ottawa Festival, coming to you from National Lockdown in Manchester. And I'm going to read a few poems from my new book, the Kellough Caves, and it's set in Scotland on the coast of Fife. And this first poem that I'm going to read takes place on the coastal path, which runs alongside the Kellough Caves by the sea, and it's called A Plenitude. Appearing as though they originate in spiritual rather than material seed. As proof, we don't know how to properly celebrate or mourn. Bindweed and oxeye daisy, cranesbill, harebell, hare's foot clover, whose ideology is fragrant and sticky, the underside of reflection blooming across centuries. Arguments for and against belief, volunteering in equal profusion. My many regrets have become the great passion of my life. One may also grow fond of what there isn't much of. Grass of Parnassus. And when you finally find it, it's just okay. But look for lies, and you will see them everywhere. Like the melancholy thistle, erect, spineless herb of the sunflower family. That the eradication of desire promotes peace and lengthens life is time-honored counsel. Still, you can't simply wait until you feel like it. The beauty of the campions, bladder and sea, the tough little sea rocket, is their effort in spite of, I want to say, everything, though they know nothing of what we mean when we say everything. It is a sentiment referring only to itself. Purple toadflax, common mouse ear, orchids, trefoils, buttercup, self-heal, the Adoxa moschitellina it's too late in the year for. I can hardly stand to look at them. And all identified after the fact. But for the banks of wild roses, the poppies you loved, parked like an ambulance by the barley field. I'm going to read now from one of the passages in the book that is inspired by a figure based on Saint Ethernan, who was a 7th century Scottish hermit who withdrew to the Kellough Caves in order to decide whether to establish a priory on the island of May, on May Island, directly across from the Kellough Caves, or to remain in the caves and pursue a hermit's life of contemplative solitude. And I imagine the duress of someone making a life-changing decision under extreme conditions of mental and physical duress and solitude. He didn't seem right, St. Luke. In the dream, he was not mild. And with my own voice bade me look, where the island, yards from shore, had sent forth a bridge of rock, by which I boarded. It was warm, bright. I was alone. The gray sea growled like a gear, not so much heard as felt. And when I turned back, the cave had receded to a dot. The May rolled, prepared to dive. Maybe it's still too personal how I'm doing this. Moisture in the contemplation oversupplying the contemplated. Runoff contributing to the global damp. Walls stained with it. Rising earth damp. The May's hair plastered to its skull. Mascara running. Staring through the rain-streaked window. Staring in or staring out. Rocks shivering their molecules are coated with the effort. And the spores, whose options are always open, who were born ready, engage their locking jaws. Then what had no plan is all plan. Lycan's vow is to embody the composition of the universe. Less meaning than a way for meaning to emerge. Rock groans under it, gnashes its teeth, but gives in, as everything does. You wouldn't want to think about it all the time. Short as I am on deliberate qualities, I would at least rather have death find me breathing normally, even if soaked to the bone in the vanity of seclusion. Owing to the excesses of solitude, nearly hairless, ascetic to the point of ephemerality, and suddenly you can't hold a shovel. For Pelagius, good deeds and actions are born in the rational mind, not from grace. He didn't believe in original sin. You can imagine the trouble he got into over that. Old Pelagius, keeping it dry. The nothing I do, my unmade works, the no one I love, the life brought to naught. But might one's hands not always be empty? Paul, why are you here? I would sooner send my spirit out walking between the hailstones than have you drive it to its corner on the fork of your advice. May Island's undead party orchestra is playing behind the wind, the barking seals, and my little fire's jumping like a bird tied to a branch. A mist of souls accumulates above the wave action. There are voices in the particles flung wildly about. But you are not the sea, Paul. You have no reason to be here. Your cold crept in to murder my seedling. Your ellipses are the stuff of nightmares. I have outlived my future. Why invite its ghosts to bother me where I sleep? They laugh at the fool wringing his old hands at having burned the beetle with the kindling. They laugh because I think I am alive. It confuses me, Paul. Do you hear the music inside the maze everlasting house fire? Do you see the loneliness streaming from its broken windows, like smoke in every direction? And I'm just going to read one more. You may be hearing fireworks exploding. It's bonfire night here in the UK. This is the last poem in the book. And once again, it takes place along the coastal path. And it's called Clarity. In the center of the path, near the ruined bothy, styrofoam, maybe, a sweater, fishing gear. As I approached, I saw it was a gannet. How odd. How long, then, before I realized it was dead? When did my sixth receiver register the hydrostatic pressure of fluid newly at rest between subject and object? Bill beneath its wing, the head's saffron seemed a signal that should fade in death. What killed it had not been vain in its signature, allowing for the vulnerable feet to be tucked, as is the instinct, under the quilt of its body. Cormorants presided the way they do over the sea's many funerals. Rock spoke through its forms the eulogy. The smaller is not the lesser stone. The day's warm air had cold ribbon through it, like a hotel atrium built around a stream, or the childhood swimming hole fed by an artesian current I visualized as darker than the surrounding water and more coherent, its integrity having not yet degraded. Much of what I feared then has happened, though not always as I'd feared, and so much more to fear than I'd imagined. On an afternoon beneath the clearing, we watched the gannets dive, looked from the cliff edge straight through the clear water to the origins of variety. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy the festival. Be well.